Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla. I am a writer. I currently have one poetry collection out and I am working on my first fantasy duology, currently titled Between the Waves. If you're interested in staying up to date on my writing projects, I also just launched my official writer website, and I also added a newsletter sign-up form so that you can sign up there and you can be one of the first ones to know when I have more publishing plans to announce, cover images to reveal, and stuff like that. So we are currently about a week out from Camp NaNoWriMo July. Today's video has actually been a long time in the making because I have been keeping a running list of ways that I have kind of creatively gotten around my writer's block or been able to overcome my writer's block. So I've kind of been keeping this list of little things that I've tried that turned out to work. So I feel like now is a great time to release this video and give you some resources just in case you are taking on a big challenge next month and you want to make sure that you're prepared just in case you get some writer's block. So my first tip is something that I mentioned in a recent video that I've actually tried more recently, and that is to try the dialogue first writing method. So the idea behind this is that you write the dialogue between the main characters in your scene before writing anything else. So before writing the setting or any sort of descriptions, you just do the dialogue so that you can understand what conversations are going to be had, what's going to be happening in that scene between the characters, which I find very helpful because when you're writing a story, obviously it's most of the time going to be very character driven, or at least that is the goal for me. And doing the dialogue first method allows you to kind of write out a sort of script that is going to be happening in that scene. You know where the characters are going to start, where they're going to end, how the conversation's going to go, and then you don't necessarily get bogged down as much by the other details of the scene that you can kind of like flesh out in later drafts anyways. I have really enjoyed using this method. I've found it wildly helpful, and I think that it's going to be something that I'm going to use more often when I'm writing because I want my dialogue to be the best it can possibly be. For me, when I'm reading dialogue and like poor dialogue that feels unrealistic or unnatural or cringy is one of the first things to pull me out of a story. So if I start with the dialogue first method, those interactions between characters are going to get more revisions than anything else, and hopefully they're going to be as strong as I can possibly make them. And I feel like just giving my brain like a new focus often freshens things up and removes any blocks that I'm having. Tip or trick number 2 is to open a book that you enjoyed, that you've already read, just because if you open to a later page and you spoil yourself, no one's going to be happy about that. And from that random page, grab a couple paragraphs. I've actually done this before where I've grabbed a couple paragraphs and I've literally typed them up into my Word document and then rewrite that paragraph to fit your own book. And I know that this seems kind of confusing, but basically the idea is to take a book that you've enjoyed, a book that you know, grab a couple paragraphs from that book, and then use that writing style and structure to inspire your own. So like, for example, I'll take a few paragraphs from a book and then I'll change the two people talking so that it's my characters instead. And then I'll change what they've said so that it actually makes sense. And then I'll like tweak the setting or something. And again, the reason that I think doing something like this works is because often that like change of creativity and trying something new and trying to like change the context, the setting, the dialogue, those little pieces often help me get to the point where I know what I actually need to write in order to get past the writer's block. Like often doing something like that will bring me to a place where I'm like, you know what, the thing that I just rewrote from this book that I enjoyed is absolute crap, doesn't make any sense. But you know what would make it make sense? Changing this particular thing that is now going to re-inspire me for my story and get me past the writer's block. Does that make sense? Just like open a book that you've enjoyed, grab some writing from it and use it as inspiration, whether you use the structure, the dialogue, give your brain something new to work with and see if that helps. Okay, number 3, this one I have heard before, and that is to change the weather in the scene. So if you're really struggling with a scene, something as simple as changing like a surface level piece of that scene can be enough to shake up your ideas and get you past the writer's block. So for example, maybe you haven't even talked about the weather in this scene and maybe you decide to. Now you want to start mentioning the weather. Maybe it was a beautiful sunny day and you've decided that you want to change it so that it's thunderstorming and it's really windy and it's a little bit spooky and it like changes the mood. Maybe your characters are in the mountains and it's the very first snowfall of the year and they're excited even though they're on this like perilous quest where, you know, they might die. Maybe your characters were walking down a dark path in the middle middle of the night and the clouds in the sky have cleared and they realize that there's a meteor shower happening. So they lay down in the grass to like watch this meteor shower. It's little things like that that really change the mood, and I feel like you underestimate how the weather and just changing the weather can affect the mood and therefore can like re-inspire you for new things to happen and help you get further along when you're feeling blocked with whatever you're writing. Number 4 is one that I struggle with but has always been helpful, and that is to enlist a friend. It can be as simple as grabbing one of your friends that is willing to listen to you even if they don't write and trying to explain your plot to them, or trying to explain the scene that you're writing, where you're stuck and why you're stuck. And I know that that sounds scary, and often your friend isn't actually going to know what the solution is, but for me, saying things out loud is so wildly helpful. Ask your friend like a made-up scenario that is the scenario you're stuck with in your book. Ask what your friend would do. Try to explain to them why you're doing certain things. Often saying it out loud and trying to like work through it with someone else there helps you to like see the bigger picture a bit more and like see it from a new person's perspective and see where the actual issue is so that you can get past whatever's blocking you. If you want to take this a step further, try to find some beta readers. On that note, I did restart my Discord. You can access it for free, and I have a channel in there for specifically for beta readers, critique partners, to connect. Basically just anyone who is interested in writing mostly fantasy romance, because these are the beta readers that applied for Between the Waves. It's free to join the Discord, and you can always message in there and see if anyone is keen to like read the chapter you're talking about, give you some feedback, just like try to help you figure it out. And that is the reason that I made this Discord, is because I feel like there's a community here that wants to be able to chat with each other and help each other out with their books and their writing. So that's the purpose of it. So feel free to join that Discord down below if you're interested. But yeah, number 4 is to enlist a friend or just another real human that you can kind of like bounce ideas off of. Tip number 5 is to keep a list of high reward treats. And I know that sounds like I'm a dog. What I mean by that is I keep like a running list of scenes, interactions, action sequences, conversations, chapters, just like basically little moments or anything that I really, really want to happen in the story and I'm just like so excited to write about. So I will keep a running list of those types of pieces for the story. And then if I find that I'm having writer's block, I will actually go through and I will pick one of those scenes or one of those pieces that I want to write, and I'll start writing it, because I know that these are already things that like the ideas are there. I know what's going to happen. I'm excited about them. It's like those pieces of the story that came to you very easily and that you know you're not going to have to work that hard for to actually like get them done. So if I am having writer's block, I will pull from that list and I will grab one of my high reward scenes, if you will, and then I will write that in order to get excited again, get some momentum back with my writing, and then ideally, once I've finished writing that, I will have like more clarity and more creativity, and I'll be able to figure out like how to get past the writer's block that I was having with like wherever I left off. I feel like I keep those ideas because I know that at some point I'm going to need an easy win. Number 6 is a fun one. Sometimes I will add a new character to the scene in order to change up the dynamic, make things a bit more interesting. I think it can be really fun if you add a character that you know the main character doesn't like, or maybe you add a character that you know the main character has a crush on or really, really likes. Also, option is to add an animal to the scene just to like shake things up a little bit. I feel like this is a really fun way to not only add more depth and like dynamics to the scene, because you've now added another being for the main character and whoever else is there to start to interact with, but it also like gives you some fun creativity. Like maybe you're adding that the main character and the love interest are in an argument and then they're walking down the street and they run into this little stray kitten. Doesn't that sound adorable? And I feel like that's much more exciting to like start to write about, even just to get the ideas flowing again. So number 6 is to like add a new character, can be an animal, for the other characters in the scene to start to interact with and maybe make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting to write. Number 7 is an interesting one. I started to do this with smells. So number 7 is to add another sense to the scene. So like sight, smell, sound, taste, touch. For me, I started to do this because I felt like it made the scenes more interesting, and it made the setting stand out and just feel more real. And I started to add it in like certain backstories that I was writing. So like the character would recognize a certain smell that she would only smell when she was back at the market at home, because it's like a certain street food or something that's like only in her region. Something that happens in Between the Waves often is like the smell of salt water that I feel like often just like adds something to the scene and gives you something to play around with. Maybe there's a certain sound that's happening, like there's a clock ticking, and it starts to really annoy the main character or something because they're already frustrated and stressed out and overstimulated. You know what I mean? So add another sense to the scene, because not only does this again give you something to play around with, but it also is just going to like add another layer of depth to the scene that can make it feel a lot more real later on when you're editing and when you're reading through these chapters and you're like, oh yeah, I feel like this scene would be a little flat if I hadn't added these extra senses that made it feel more realistic. Number 8 also has to do with interactions for the character, but it's not like sense specific or other character specific, like you're not adding a new character or a sense or anything. But for number 8, I wanted to include a more generalized version of those tips, which is just to add something that the character feels strongly about for them to react to. So options for this are, maybe they had a hobby that they used to do when they were younger. They used to, I don't know, play the harp, and they never get to play anymore. And then they hear someone playing a harp in a shop, and it like brings up memories for them, or it makes their mood get worse because they're sad and bitter that they don't get to do that anymore. Characters have fears. We all have something that we're unreasonably afraid of for some reason. Phobias, things like that. Maybe add one of those to the scene. Maybe your character is absolutely terrified of dogs and there's an adorable dog in the scene, but your character now has something to react to. Like maybe even though this dog is just sleeping peacefully by the fire and everything's calm, your main character can no longer focus on the conversation they're trying to have with someone that's like very important because there's this dog here and that's like one of their fears. Again, this is adding something for your character to interact with, for your character to react to, and therefore add another layer to the scene and hopefully get the creative juices flowing. And things like this that are, when you're adding something that your character feels strongly about, are also really great ways to like make us connect to your character on a more emotional level and make us understand them a bit better. So a lot of these ways that you can try and work through writer's block, like these creative little additions that you can try and use and things you can play around with, not only help you learn your characters, but can also benefit the draft later on down the road because you've played around with different aspects of your story. Number 9 is a fun one. It's simple. Read. If you have gone through like this entire list of different techniques and strategies and tips and tricks to try, it was great alliteration. Loved that. If you've gone through all of those things and tried everything that you can think of and you're still stressed out and struggling with getting past this writer's block, pick up a book. Maybe you have a book that you've really been anticipating, you've been excited for it, but you haven't got the chance to pick it up yet. Pick it up and start reading. I feel like I kind of chatted about this in a previous video, but in order to be a good writer, you have to be consuming stories, you have to be reading. And for me, when I have writer's block and I pick up a book that I know I was excited about and I let myself kind of get sucked into it, within the first few chapters, I usually have ideas flowing for my own story. It definitely helps if I've picked up a book that is in the genre that I'm writing, at least fantasy, but theoretically it can be any book. Even if you're writing fantasy and you pick up a contemporary romance, there's going to be dialogue that you might want to use, you know? So pick up a book, start to read, relax a little bit, let your imagination run wild, let yourself get sucked into the story. And the very last tip is the last one for a reason, and it is also the simplest but the most difficult for me personally, and that is to rest and set the book aside and take a break. Again, if you've tried everything to get past this block that you're feeling and you just can't figure out the way forward, a big part of the writing process is learning when you need a break from the story versus learning when you need to actually like push through, because you can feel writer's block for different reasons, and half the time what we need to do is come up with some creative strategies to try and push through and get the momentum going again. But the other half of the time what you really need is a break from the manuscript, a break from the story, a break from the characters. Go for a walk, go outside, take a few days off, a few weeks off, a few months off if you want to. But the fact of the matter is that if you have tried all these different ways to overcome whatever block you're feeling, chances are trying harder and just continuing to force yourself is going to make you bitter and frustrated and start to resent the story that you're working on. And if you're feeling emotions like that, you're not going to be creative. If you're feeling negative, you're feeling stressed out, you're feeling hopeless and resentful towards your project, that's not the mindset that you want to be in order to actually get past the writer's block. And that's not the mindset that you want to be in order to like allow your creativity to flourish. And if nothing has worked yet, chances are trying harder and stressing yourself out more is probably not going to be the thing that like brings a magical solution to you. But again, with this one, doing the process and like learning what your process is going to allow you to understand when you do need to push through versus when you just need a break. Again, it's a strong suggestion of mine. Do I actually follow it? Not as much as I probably should, but I'm learning and we're getting there together. So those are 10 tips and tricks that I have tried to use to get past writer's block and get my momentum going and get re-inspired for writing scenes when I'm really struggling through it. I hope that it was helpful. I hope that at least a few of these tips inspired you, and I hope that if you try them, they kind of help you get past the writer's block that you're feeling. I also feel like a lot of them are, like I mentioned, great ways to kind of like make scenes more interesting, which is a really wonderful way to work through writer's block, is by trying to strategically make the thing that you're writing feel more interesting and new and like just more fun to play around with. And that's the whole point. We're here to have fun. So hopefully these help you, especially if you're doing Camp NaNoWriMo or if you're doing like a big writing challenge or you've really been struggling with writer's block. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.